Now, to say I was skeptical when Wonka was first announced would be an understatement, because Hollywood hasn't quite delivered on the remakes, prequels, or sequels as of late.
When I was like, wham, chicka, wham, wham, chicka, wham.
But when I found out the creators of one of my favorite modern movies, Paddington, were making this movie, along with insanely talented actors like Timothée Chalamet, Olivia Colman, and Michael Keegan-Key, I increasingly became optimistic. But then we got hit with statements like this coming from Hugh Grant. I couldn't have hated the whole thing more. I slightly hate making movies, but I have lots of children and need money. When asked if it was all worth it viewing the final product, he said, "Not really."
Look, this is what I get offered these days. I'm in the freak show phase of my career. I do baddies, psychopaths, weirdos, perverts, and now Oompa Loompas.
So after hearing comments like that from Hugh Grant, after already being skeptical, but then also having it involve such amazing actors, I was quite curious when I did finally sit down to watch this movie as to whether or not I would actually like it, and quite curious as to how the end product would turn out. And that now leads us to the story, which straight away begins with Willy Wonka on his way to the big city to follow his dreams of becoming the greatest chocolate maker that ever lived. But from the jump, we see one of the biggest flaws of this film, which is Wonka himself. This movie made no secret of the fact that this was a prequel to Gene Wilder's Wonka, and that's why they used the same music from that Gene Wilder Wonka movie for this one, except the character of Wonka lacked all the elements that made Gene Wilder's Wonka so interesting. He wasn't really dark, there didn't seem to be much layering behind his character, and he just came across as a very naive, optimistic, and all-round nice guy. Which would be fine to start the movie that way if eventually the world did break down Wonka and he would become more darker and cynical as the story unfolded, but that never actually happens. He's the same nice, happy guy by the end of the movie as he was at the beginning, and he doesn't have much of an arc in regards to his optimism, naivety, and overall niceness. Now, he does grow in other ways, so I won't say he has zero character arc at all. However, there really isn't an interesting character arc, as it's more so about the characters around him, and it's more so about him just realizing how great he really is, and just learning to share it with other people. So there is a small arc to the character of Willy Wonka, but he never does become that Gene Wilder Wonka that he's really meant to, seeing as this is meant to be the prequel to that movie. And the way in which they portrayed Wonka in this film really did come across as a very safe choice, which defines this movie in a way, as they really played it safe with this entire story, which is something I honestly hate in cinema, because when you try and make a movie for everyone, in my opinion, you end up just making a movie for no one.
If you go to the movies, so many big movies just not good. It's because they're not being made by a person who cares about it. They're being made by people who are trying to make something that they think someone else is going to like. And that's not how art works.
Because the movie doesn't really have any sort of defining qualities, and doesn't seem to really know what type of movie it really is. And this starts to show itself more with this film, as once he arrives in the big city, he is plotted against and held back by the chocolate cartel, who have a chokehold on the chocolate industry in the big city. And this would have made for a great opportunity to make the film a little more dark, and add some overall texture to the movie, but they seem to surface level and almost like caricatures, which didn't really add any sort of layering or any real subtext to the film. Which would be fine if this film was purely for kids, but there are various lines and themes that are clearly just for adults, and so it really does confuse you, because rather than feel like a movie everyone can enjoy, like Paddington was, this felt like a movie that jumped between audiences, as some scenes felt like it was for adults, some scenes for kids, but they never really combined to actually make a clear, conducive vision for the film, and like I said, it just didn't know what it really was. And on top of not knowing what it was, it also didn't really seem like it knew what it wanted to achieve, because this is the prequel to the Gene Wilder movie. However, it doesn't really lead up to that film in any sort of way, and tells a very glossed over and bland origin story of Wonka without even showing us how he even became a great chocolate maker to begin with, as from the get-go, go, he's already amazing at making chocolate, which once again doesn't really make it that great of an origin story. And on top of this movie being very bland and surface level, there was also no real risk, whether that be from the performances or creatively. And in a way, it just kind of put the casting of Timothée Chalamet to waste, because he's so good at layering his performances and carrying subtext and carrying weight throughout a movie, but because his character was written very surface level, very bland, without much really going on behind the scenes, there was nothing for Timothée Chalamet to really play with, and it really did put his best quality as an actor to waste and never really utilized it, and just made him this sort of whimsical, optimistic character, which was probably more suited to another actor, as Timothée Chalamet just playing a whimsical, fun character doesn't really work because it doesn't play to his strengths at all. And not to mention the wasted opportunities with other characters like Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa, who really is quite funny and does bring some life to every scene that he's a part of, but he really does go to waste as well because he's only in about 4 or 5 scenes. And when you watch the trailer, it makes it seem like he's going to be around almost for the entire story. However, they don't really use that, and I can see why Hugh Grant might be frustrated with the end product of this movie, because he is so underutilized, and it really does make a waste of a character that everyone loves, because when you think of Willy Wonka, you automatically think of an Oompa Loompa, yet they didn't really play into that enough, and it really did feel very wasted. And same goes for Willy Wonka's mother, Sally Hawkins, who's kind of the only character from Willy Wonka's past that add any sort of subtext, any sort of layering to the character, and some darkness. However, they don't really play into her character enough, as they only really have 2 flashbacks to her character, and it just isn't enough to really put that cloud of darkness over Willy Wonka that I think they were trying to achieve. But like I said, at the end of the day, he just seems like a nice, optimistic character, and that cloud of darkness, that baggage he's meant to be carrying, really is lost, and you don't really feel it much, and that's entirely down to the fact that they didn't really play into Sally Hawkins' character as much as they should have. So all in all, this film just felt like a huge waste of talent, potential, and time, and I'm sure some may enjoy this movie, but for me, I always need some type of subtext or risk, otherwise it just feels very dialed in, glossed over, and doesn't really have much to remember it by. And I think when you are dealing with an origin story, when you are dealing with a spin-off or any sort of prequel or sequel, it's important to bring some sort of creative vision to the table and separate it some way and make it feel like it was actually worthwhile. But this feeling so safe, so generic, and just like any type of holiday blockbuster movie, it didn't really add much creative flair, didn't really add a unique vision, and didn't really feel like it was worthwhile. And at the end of the day, when you do finish watching this movie, it does feel like you just watched a huge cash grab. But what are your thoughts on this film? If you've seen it, let me know down below in the comments. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you all on my next video.